Episode -1, take 1. Here's the background story. Our story starts here. Everything from the outside always looks pristine and perfect, right? Looking at old pictures, you think, what kind of childhood did she have? And of course, I'd like to say it was completely normal by all respects, right? Of course, there was some things that were pretty normal, but then there were things that weren't. I remember when I was about 5 or 6, I'd gotten for Christmas this Play School tape player, kind of like a Walkman, but it was a child version. And I remember listening in loop over and over The Drummer Boy. So if you've ever celebrated and you know that song, you know it, right? And for some reason, I realized at that point in time, at 5 or 6 years old, that one day my mom was going to die. And I was just crying and crying and crying, and I couldn't stop. And it's like that's my earliest memory of deep sadness. Growing up in my household, there was a lot of trauma. There was a lot of domestic violence, verbal abuse, physical abuse. I definitely feel like that impacted me and how I grew up. Fast forward in time to high school age, 14, 15, 16, in that ballpark. I remember December of whichever one of those years, very turbulent time. Christmas time was never a good time for us, at least in my memories of childhood. This particular year, me and my dad got into it over something so petty, but because it had just escalated so much, I contemplated suicide. Let's fast forward a little bit more in time, shall we? So now, at this point in my life, I'm in my early 20s. I'm in college. My parents have been divorced a few years. And for some reason, I don't remember why, I went to go talk to a counselor there at UIW where I was attending. And after revealing all of the trauma and things that I've gone through in my early life, that particular counselor said I was suffering from PTSD. Couple years later, fast forward again, I'm diagnosed with anxiety, diagnosed with depression. Don't know which order they were diagnosed in, but was dealing with a lot of things. I can still remember my first panic attack. That was the first indication that something was not right. I remember, and thankfully I wasn't alone. Thankfully I was with someone that had some experience with that, unfortunately. Felt like I couldn't breathe, felt like there was such pressure on my chest. I was really, really, in the sense, panicking because I didn't know what the heck was going on. Had never experienced it. And that led me to go and seek medical attention to find out what in the world, what's going on. Definitely an important thing to note during this whole course of time, right? That childhood, early adulthood, going to the doctor, getting those blood tests. All those blood tests are coming back normal. There was nothing wrong with me on that sense, right? All the numbers were driving, all the numbers were good, but nothing was adding up, right? So for years and years after that initial diagnosis, I suffered. I suffered with that anxiety. I suffered with that depression. Every winter or every other winter, I'd get really down. Didn't understand why. Let's fast forward some more, shall we? So now, welcome to my 30s. Got married and something changed. Not just about getting married, right? It all started with a simple, innocent hug. So here's what had happened. Normal day, normal interaction. My husband goes to give me one of his big bear hugs, and I immediately jump up and push him away, and I'm like, ow! Got this really weird excruciating pain in my lower back from when he hugged me, and it wasn't even like he was like squeezing too hard. It was a normal hug, and I'm like, what is that about? So that happened in 2015. So fast forward 16, 17, 18, 3 years it took them to figure out what it was. So by this time, I was experiencing a whole lot of pain. They diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, and the nurse practitioner that was aggressively trying to figure out what was going on, right? Because again, even with this blood work to make sure all the levels were good, am I anemic, is my iron low, all these different things, everything was coming up good, yet I was still in pain. So finally start the course of treatment, so to speak. Month 1, they put me on a medication, didn't do nothing. Month 2, they put me on another medication, and that made my anxiety and depression worse. Literally could not get out of bed most days. I was just sad, and it was just awful. So if you can imagine, I was missing a whole lot of work. Trial number 3, third medication, finally something that took the edge off of the discomfort, the pain. But guess what? Side effect. So I was waking up in the middle of the night drenched, just wet, uncomfortable. So how am I supposed to sleep? Yeah, I'm getting a break from the pain, but I'm waking up all wet, y'all. So an important thing to note, something that stuck with me for years, that aggressively hard-working nurse practitioner that I worked with, when she diagnosed me with fibromyalgia, she mentioned how the other things that I suffered from were under the same umbrella. Food for thought. So by this time, I've missed entirely too much work according to the state of Texas, because that's the entity that I'd worked for 6 years at that point, and they were trying to give me the boot. And so at this point, my husband was like, not doing this anymore. So I walked away from that job. No 2-week notice, nothing, because I had to pick my health over financial security, if you will. So that started the journey into having to wean off of medication, right? Because I was no longer going to have insurance. So that was an event not to be relived. So if you've ever had to leave a job like that, you typically get insurance for 30 days after you leave, right? So I had 30 days to wean off of this medication. Took me about 8 weeks to fully wean off of and become a normal person again. Because even though at a point in time I was able to stop actually physically taking that medication, you guys, I had withdrawals after only being on the medication for like a month. Super crazy, right? About a month. So 8 weeks of withdrawal, uncomfortable, nerves just a mess, emotional, moody, irritable, unbelievable. I don't even know how I'm still married to this day, because it was pretty bad. I feel absolutely horrible for my husband having to go through that. But it was like, what choice did we have? Because one, the medication was making things difficult too, right? Because of the side effects. But then we weren't able to have the prescription, right? No insurance. So that started our journey into the more natural route. So we went to a local vitamin shop, not like the mainstream, like literal vitamin shop. It was called something else local, and the staff was pretty helpful. They were able to give me some supplements and things, but I wasn't educated. And yeah, they gave me some printouts and stuff, but I wasn't educated enough to know how these things were going to help. You know, I was used to normal pharma life. You take a pill, you get instant reaction, feeling something or other, right? So of course I took these supplements that they had given me at this store for a few days, maybe a few weeks. Didn't feel a difference. So what do you think I did? I stopped. So at that point, I just decided, well, I have no other choice. I'm just going to have to learn to live, learn to deal with it. Gave myself a lot of patience, right? Had to know my limitations, what I could and couldn't do. And as time gradually went on, some of the pain did kind of ease up because, mind you, I wasn't in the environment that I was in anymore. That state agency was pretty stressful. 6 years, compacted, adding to my childhood trauma, so undealt with trauma, mind you. So I just kind of dealt with it until one day, dun dun dun. So here we go, fast forwarding again a couple years into life and dealing with flare-ups here and there. I just thought it was a part of life, right? In comes the pandemic and everybody shut down. And the particular odd end job I'm doing involves me being in a store like a sardine around other people, knowing how, or rumor has it, right, that fibromyalgia falls in the autoimmune category. So feeling like my health was at risk and how bad COVID was in the beginning, I did not want to die, right? I was very scared. So thankfully I got to stay home and shield myself from being exposed early on. But then fast forward another year, and I, being home, have been on social media like everybody else, right? And I get aligned with the perfect group, you guys. So the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis within my business is amazing. Some powerful, knowledgeable people, and that rubbed off on me, right? Because then I was able to experience and learn some science things, learned about my inner science geek, started to learn and know what to do to help my body naturally. Now, light bulb moment, I was able to help myself, but then also to help others. So I'm happy to report I'm in so much better health these days. Definitely managing things a lot better. But that brings me to the reason for this series. So there's some new things that have developed in my life that, although the blood tests and everything come back normal, I'm still struggling. So that led me to think of other things that I've dealt with over the few years, knowing that my levels were quote unquote normal, and the lack of education when it comes to knowing our body systems. So guess what? That's what this series is all about. Telling you my story, sharing some of the things I've dealt with, learning and integrating these natural things that can help us in an amazing way, but in hopes that I can help someone else out there struggling just like I was. So I hope you will join me on this journey. Stay tuned for episode number 1. So I'm happy to report now